Today I'm going to come to you not doing Bible prophecy, but the Lord started showing me some really stunning coincidences dealing with Charlie Kirk and what happened to him. I have to kind of watch my words. Okay, I've been trying to put this together for a few days, and I'm going to give you the most thorough rendition of it. Now, when I put this information together, I started asking questions one by one, and it started just unlocking the whole story of what happened to him. In other words, I believe that this scenario answers a lot of the things that Baron Coleman discovered, but I found something that causes the things that Baron Coleman found. So I'm going to talk about this in detail, and I'm going to point out the situations that happened to Charlie that verify this particular type of weapon. And I really believe that this information, little by little, piece by piece, expresses exactly in detail what happened to Charlie and what type of weapon was used on him. And this just started with an idea that I thought in my head, and I started asking questions about the weapon and how it works. And there were things in there that described the effects that happened to Charlie Kirk. So this is going to be shocking because this may very well have solved what struck him. Now, this is allegedly, this is just a theory, but just listen to it and think about all the things you've heard from Candace Owens and Ian Carroll and Baron Coleman and Trigger Smart. So I'm going to start this out by saying that I believe this could have been a particle beam weapon. And here is the first detail that will blow you away. A particle beam weapon would likely cause both an entrance and an exit wound if the beam has enough energy to penetrate the body completely. The entrance wound would be more focused and precise, while the exit wound could be larger and more irregular due to energy dispersal and tissue damage. If the beam doesn't have sufficient energy to pass through, it would only create a deep burn and destruction at the entry site without an exit wound. Exactly what we see on Charlie. And what got me thinking about this was seeing this woman who had taken a big fall, and she was all scuffed up and bruised, and this wound on her chin was very similar to the shape of the wound that looked kind of like a burn. Something targeted the skin and went in and did tissue damage to Charlie Kirk. He did not have an exit wound. So that's the first big point. If the beam doesn't have sufficient energy to pass through, it would only create a deep burn and destruction at the entry site without an exit wound. So that's point one. Now, we know that Charlie was wearing the microphone and that there was a magnet involved. So you're not going to believe this, because the magnet of the microphone appeared to have moved on Charlie Kirk's shirt. But listen to this. Charged particle beams, like electrons or protons, are deflected and steered by magnets rather than directly attracted to them. Magnets apply a Lorentz force perpendicular to the particle's velocity, causing the beam to bend or curve. This effect is used in particle accelerators to bend, focus, and stabilize beams. Key details regarding particle beams and magnets. A magnetic field does not attract moving charged particles like a magnet attracts iron. Instead, the field acts as the charge to create a perpendicular force, bending the path of the beam. So this magnet on Charlie's shirt appeared to have been moved, like suddenly moved. Instead, the field acts on the charge to create a perpendicular force, bending the path of the beam. Only charged particle beams respond to magnetic fields. Neutral particles, such as neutrons, are not affected by magnetic fields. So, was he shot with particle beams and it burned the skin and went deep into the tissue, doing destruction inside? And then the magnet was attracted to the beam, so it moved and kind of bent the beam or something like that. Now, this is going to blow your mind, because remember how everybody has been saying that the blood did not look real, that it looked very thick and clumpy, and people theorized that it was a theatrical squib like what they do in movies to trigger something and then blood comes out, but it doesn't look like real blood. Well, I just discovered something in this type of weapon that explains the blood and why it looked like that coming out of Charlie from where the beam would have shot into him, leaving the burn and doing destruction on the inside. And I'm going to explain that destruction in a minute. But what would a laser weapon do to a human? A laser weapon would cause severe thermal damage to a human, ranging from skin burns. Remember when Barron was pointing out that it looked like there were burns on his arms and on his hands? I don't believe that his hands were singed like Barron showed, but he showed what looked like burns, and he talked about possible electrocution. So this explains that, ranging from skin burns and protein denaturization to vaporizing tissue, potentially leading to blindness if directed at the eyes. Well, we know that Charlie's eyes were suddenly closed and never opened again, with a specific effect depending heavily on the laser's power, wavelength, and exposure time. High-power military lasers could cause lethal internal heating, while lower-power ones might act as incapacitating dazzlers. Now, I want you to hear this because this blows my mind. Types of damage. Thermal. The most common effect where laser energy rapidly heats tissue, causing burns, coagulation, clotting, and boiling of water, creating steam. Photochemical specific UV wavelengths can trigger chemical reactions, leading to skin aging or cancer, though this is less of an immediate weapon effect. So I want you to focus on the burns and the coagulation or clotting. Now, remember how Charlie's arms went up and he did all of this movement? Okay, it says acoustical, rapid heating and vaporization can create shock waves, causing further damage. So the reaction in his body was like the shock wave. Skin, superficial burns, charring, or deeper tissue damage, potentially creating a hole as water boils off. So remember how the wound didn't appear immediately, that his body reacted, and then that wound appeared, and then the coagulation came out of blood? With eyes extremely vulnerable, even low-power lasers can cause immediate and permanent blindness by burning the retinal burns, or causing other optical damage, leading to the ban on blinding lasers by international protocol. Internal. High-energy infrared lasers can penetrate skin and clothing, delivering energy deep inside, similar to a microwave oven, denaturing proteins and causing rapid death. Low power. Dazzlers designed for temporary blindness or disorientation, non-lethal, though sometimes causing permanent vision loss. High power anti-personnel capable of causing severe burns, vaporizing tissue, and potentially being lethal by cooking the body from within or causing explosive effects, though often more effective against vehicles due to atmospheric interference like fog. So now you just heard that the particle beam, the laser, can cause the coagulation. So coagulation of the blood defined is this. And if this doesn't describe exactly the blood coming out of Charlie, I don't know what does. Blood coagulation looks like a transformation from liquid blood to a jelly-like clumpy mass. Bingo. Forming a reddish or brownish plug, a clot, held together by a mesh of protein fibers, fibrin, and platelets to stop bleeding, often appearing as a dark, jelly-like clump or dried, reddish-brown material depending on age or location. What it looks like visually, jelly mass. A fresh clot often appears as a clump of reddish jelly as fibrin strands create a mesh trapping blood cells. Netting. You might see a network of fibrin holding everything together. Cellular components, tiny platelets, cells are also visible within the clot. Color change. Older clots can become darker, turning brownish as they dry out or sit longer. Well, all of a sudden the blood just clumped out and gushed out in this coagulation of blood that turned basically, I believe, when he was struck with the particle beams, into this reddish, brownish blood clot clumping coagulation of blood that was no longer liquid. Now let's think about how Charlie's clothing had like a puff of air come up in it, okay? Internal high-energy infrared lasers can penetrate skin and clothing, delivering energy deep inside. In essence, a laser weapon delivers intense energy, causing burns, boiling, and tissue destruction, with the severity dependent on the laser's power and focus, making eye injuries and deep thermal damage major concerns. Remember Baron Coleman's theory about electrocution? This fits that too. Key factors with the particle beams, with the lasers, key factors are particle type. Protons are particularly dangerous as they embed themselves, depositing energy deeply. Electrons might just cause surface burns or electrocution. So there's Baron Coleman's theory proved right there through this type of weapon. Beam versus single particle. A single low-energy particle does little. A high-energy beam of billions of particles is destructive. Higher energy means deeper penetration before depositing most of its energy, like in protein cancer therapy, where the energy is precisely targeted to a tumor. A real-world example is in 1978, a Russian scientist, Anatoly Bergorsky, was hit by a proton beam from an accelerator, experiencing a massive radiation dose along a single line through his head, causing paralysis on one side, but not immediate death due to the beam's narrowness and specific energy, demonstrating localized severe damage. So that is profound, because Baron was speculating he could have been electrocuted, and he pointed out the burns. And this discovery of this type of weapon connecting to all of that is stunning. Thinking about the movements of Charlie's arms, the way that his neck swelled and his face swelled, there's an explanation for that, which is kinetic energy. So the particle's kinetic energy is imparted to matter in the target, inducing near instantaneous and catastrophic superheating at the surface. And when penetrating deeper, ionization effects can upset or destroy electronics. Think about it. Everybody's been saying that the microphone blew up. Everybody was saying that the microphone was the weapon, but the particle beam laser that has the kinetic energy destroys electronics. So the microphone magnet particle beams were attached or attracted to the magnet on Charlie Kirk's shirt, which caused the destruction of the microphone, the electronics. So I had asked the question, whatever happens when particle beams hit the body, what does the kinetic energy do to it? And the kinetic energy could be what caused the distortion in his neck and face and caused the air to puff in his shirt, making it move up. When a high energy particle beam hits the body, its immense kinetic energy causes violent localized interactions, creating a narrow path of extreme ionization, cellular destruction, like super intense radiation burns, potential DNA damage, and even nuclear fragmentation, effectively creating a hole of irradiated dead tissue. What was on his neck? A hole of irradiated tissue. Though much of the beam's energy often passes through depending on particle type and energy level, sometimes depositing energy in deep, precise ways like in a proton therapy. Now, the effects of kinetic energy transfer, massive energy deposition, the particles moving near light speed carry huge amounts of energy. When they hit atoms in the body, they transfer this energy rapidly. So we saw all of this movement with the shirt, like a puff of energy. It was like the kinetic energy and distorting his body, and this was the kinetic energy affecting him. Ionization and cellular damage. This energy knocks electrons off atoms, creating ions, which destroys molecules, disrupts cell membranes, and shreds DNA, leading to cell death and tissue necrosis. Thermal effects. The rapid energy release can instantly vaporize water and tissue, causing extreme localized heat akin to a super hot laser beam. Radiation. The process generates intense secondary radiation like ions, neutrons, gamma rays, and could cause radiation poisoning with protons potentially causing deep-seated damage. Now, I asked it about a flash of light or what would happen, and it says, yes, a particle beam weapon would likely produce some visible light, though the exact appearance would depend on the type of particles, their energy, and the environment. Charged particle beams, like electrons or ions, can cause the air to ionize, creating a faint glow similar to a lightning bolt or aurora. High energy beams might also produce sparks or flashes if they strike dust. Now remember the spots on Charlie's hand? They kind of look like mud splatter. So I looked to see if anybody noticed a flash of light, and there was somebody, and on X I found world headlines that stated, "The flash everyone missed. Newly enhanced footage reveals a burst of light from Charlie Kirk's microphone." Well, I'm thinking it was from the particle beam. The flash of light happened, and it was lightning speed. It happened so fast nobody could see it. And he showed something that looked like a puff of steam or something, which can happen with a particle beam weapon. But let me finish that. It said high energy beams might also produce sparks or flashes if they strike dust, moisture, or surfaces along the way. Neutral particle beams are mostly invisible in a vacuum, but in air they might create short trails of light due to secondary effects like ionization. In movies, they are often shown as bright laser-like bolts, but in reality, the light would probably be much fainter and less cinematic unless the beam interacts with something in its path. What would a particle beam weapon look like? It looks like a straight bolt of blue-white lightning. Proton beams can also be steered with magnets. So there was a magnet on Charlie's shirt that the microphone attached to. The relativistic protons in these beams can be extremely penetrating, typically punching through solid or liquid matter before disintegrating into a shower of high radiation. So all of those things absolutely are what happened to Charlie Kirk. Now, I wanted to see, when I typed in Fort Huachuca, to see what it said about this place, to see if they do particle beam weapons. It says Fort Huachuca is a hub for testing advanced military tech, including directed energy lasers and electronic warfare, but evidence points more towards testing laser microwave systems and command control, communications, computers, cyber intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance tools, rather than actual particle beam weapons, though related R&D like neutral particle beam has occurred historically, with current focus on integrating new tech like ArcNet for data sharing and testing directed energy for air defense counter-drone roles. Fort Huachuca is a U.S. Army installation in Arizona known for its testing and development of electronic warfare and communication systems. While it hosts the Electronic Proving Ground, the EPG, for testing advanced technologies, there's no publicly available information confirming the presence of particle beam technology at this facility. Directed energy weapons, including particle beams, are under research by various entities. What's happening at Fort Huachuca? Directed energy and CSISR focus. Recent news highlights experiments with high-energy lasers, known as HELS, for counter-drone, air defense, and electronic warfare payloads, often integrated with drones, UAS, or high-altitude balloons, notes Laser Wars. ArcTech and data sharing. A significant recent project involves ArcNet, which is ARCNET, an Army networking tool connecting Huachuca with other ranges, enabling real-time data for future combat scenarios. Proving ground for future tech. Huachuca serves as a testing ground for future battlefield tech, including directed energy, under initiatives like Arcane Thunder, says U.S. Army, EURAF, and Laser Wars. Particle beam history and context. Historical R&D. The term particle beam often refers to past ambitious projects like the Neutral Particle Beam, or NPB, program from the 1980s and 90s, which had space-based goals as discussed in Defense One and DTIC. Current limitations. While advanced lasers and microwaves are tested, true particle beam weapons with major destructive power are still largely in R&D, facing significant engineering hurdles, notes DTIC. In summary, expect to see Fort Huachuca involved with next-generation laser defense, advanced sensor tech, and network integration rather than Star Wars-style particle beam weapons. But it's key to developing those future capabilities, say Laser Wars. Now, one final thing. Think about Lahaina. Think about that there were ships that were of the destroyer class that had the DEW weapons on them at the time, and that those weapons are made at Raytheon. And I looked this up. Now, we know that Erica Kirk's father has worked for Raytheon. Not only does Raytheon rip off the government on a regular basis, allegedly, according to this article, but its weapons have been used to kill civilians in Yemen, Gaza, and other war zones. William Hartung, a senior research fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft and longtime weapons industry watcher, told The Intercept. So I personally believe that they used a DEW weapon, a HEL weapon, a laser particle beam to start fires. And the whole thing was a land grab. They move off the indigenous people, and then they rebuild, and then they can have a Riviera. Sounds like what they did over in Gaza and what they've been plotting and scheming for 2 years to rebuild it so they can make billions off of a Riviera-style Gaza. Interesting, all of these connections. So let me summarize the particle beam weapon and how it is associated with Charlie Kirk. The entry site without an exit wound, proven with this weapon. The magnet on Charlie's shirt, potentially directing the particle beam. The so-called burns that appear on Charlie's hands. The clotting and coagulation of the blood, which turned from a liquid to a thick, chunky substance that graphically exuded from the wound. The entry wound, which burned the skin, making it look like reddish brown, and the coagulation, the destruction and severity of the laser's power going in and doing destruction to the tissues, with the kinetic energy distorting Charlie's face and neck and puffing up his shirt and making his arms go up because the power of the kinetic energy was moving throughout his body, distorting everything. We've proved that this weapon can deposit energy deeply. Electrons might just cause surface burns or electrocution. And electrocution was what Baron Coleman was theorizing may have happened to Charlie. And the particle beam weapon produced some type of light or a faint glow. The guy showed a puff of light at his neck. And we had the particles hitting the dust on the ground, which to me says that's where the mud came from that splattered onto his hand. And last but not least, the technology at Fort Huachuca that includes directed energy lasers and electronic warfare. It took me forever to think of all the questions to research that I wanted to research and put all of this together. And when the Lord started showing each one of these things one by one, that is connected to what Baron Coleman said without saying what type of weapon it was, this would explain that it was a particle beam weapon, laser, and that it could have an entry site without an exit wound. Just to sum it up, I think that this proves what really happened and how the microphone was affected by the kinetic energy which destroys the electronics, and how the magnet moved because the particle beams attached themselves to it, moved the magnet, directed it to the spot. All of these things are absolutely provable by this type of particle beam weapon laser. All of this is so astonishing because without saying what the weapon was, Baron Coleman had some of the things correct about the burns and the electrocution and all of that, all caused by a particle beam laser weapon. Wow. So the Lord is going to not let this go. The Lord is going to let everything be revealed. I am thoroughly astonished by all of these connections. And, you know, God made me such a big researcher that I do prophetic things on my channel all the time that the Holy Spirit has shown me. He shows me one thing and then I keep searching for things within that thing and then it proves it more and more. So these were things that I collected in my research to try to show you how they verify exactly what happened to Charlie. And this explains it better than anything, especially it tosses the gun weapon right out the window. And furthermore, would you really leave your grandfather's treasure of World War II weapon in the woods so somebody might find it and steal it? I doubt it. I just think this proves what type of weapon was used. So thank you for supporting my channel at paypal.me/KKROCOCO, which is KK Rococo. And if you want to read my book, that's a profound revelation of Jesus Christ for the last days. It's called The Almond Tree, Aaron's Rod, the Messiah King of Israel, available at all online bookstores, christianbook.com, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And the best place to get my book is directly from my publisher, olivepresspublisher.com. And you will go there, you'll click on the banner, it says The Almond Tree, click on it, click on the book, and then you can read all about it and listen to an interview I did quite some time ago, and tells you where to start the video, kind of, I think at the 52-minute mark. So, what do you think about this? What are the odds that every single one of these points is visible in what happened to Charlie Kirk? And may God reveal everything so that the evil one will never prevail. I'll see you next time. I hope you found this extremely astonishing. Good night, everyone.